Hello everyone and welcome to reading Shakespeare with Cats. I'm Mr. Level and these are my cats. Today we're going to be reading Act 2, Scene 3. Actually only part of it. We've already covered the Porter scene. So today we're going to be picking up right after the Porter scene ends, where the Porter exits. Cats, you ready? Okay. So Macbeth has just knocked and knocked and knocked, and now the porter has finally answered the door, finally let him in. He's made his jokes, he's had his commentary, and now Macbeth asks, "Is thy master stirring?" Enter Macbeth. Our knocking has awaked him. Here he comes. And finally, then the porter exits. Lennox, who's there with Macbeth, has just entered Macbeth's castle. Lennox says, "Good morrow, noble sir." Macbeth says, "Good morrow, both." "Is the king stirring, worthy thane?" "Not yet. He did command me to call timely on him. I have almost slipped the hour." Macbeth says, "I'll bring you to him." Now remember, Macbeth was just moments ago freaking out completely. Smalls, you remember any of the things Macbeth was worried about? Yep, and Tank, what else? Good. So Macbeth says to Macduff, "I'll bring you to him." Macduff says, "I know this is a joyful trouble to you, but yet 'tis one." Macbeth, "The labor we delight in physics pain." This is the door. And when he says this, "the labor we delight in physics pain," he's saying that it relieves pain. So in other words, it's no trouble at all. There's no pain having to do services for the king. Macduff says, "I'll make so bold a call, for 'tis my limited service," and he then exits. And now that leaves like Lennox and Macbeth alone on stage, and I don't think they really know each other very well based on the conversation they have. "Goes the king hence today?" "He does. He did appoint so." "The night has been unruly. Where we lay, our chimneys were blown down, and, as they say, lamentings heard in the air, strange screams of death, and prophesying with accents terrible of dire combustion and confused events new hatched to the woeful time. The obscure bird clamored the livelong night. Some say the earth was feverous and did shake." So in all of that, I know that Lennox's speech gets a little long there, but he's ultimately talking about the weather. If you go to the start, he says, "The night has been unruly." And that sentence there is going to help you understand the rest of the speech that he gives here. So I'm going to ask, Cats, give me an example of how the night was unruly. Smalls. Okay. Ollie. Tank. And Cats, one that you should all have noticed, probably all licked your chops when you heard it. There's also one here in the middle where he talks about prophesying with accents terrible, of dire combustion and confused events new hatched to the woeful time. Some of the wording's interesting here. He uses the word combustion when actually means confusion, according to our sideline here. And so he's saying that that prophesying, there's this prophecy in the air being spoken out that night of dire combustion and confused events new hatched to the woeful time. And you hear this new hatching, almost like it's an egg that is hatching, and here what comes out is this woeful time, this time when who knows what it's going to be. But of course we do know that the king has just been murdered, and perhaps that is the woeful time. The aftermath of his death is the woeful time that is coming out. Anyway, all this bad stuff is happening. This horrible, horrible night just so happens to coincide with Duncan being murdered. And Macbeth, what does he say? "'Twas a rough night." I love the double meaning here. We're going to see a lot of that in this scene, that Macbeth both recognizes it was a rough night in terms of what Lennox is talking about, but also he knows that he himself, it was a very rough night for him. Lennox responds, my young remembrance cannot parallel a fellow to it. Then enter Macduff. He's coming back from the chamber, and Macduff screams, oh, horror, 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 tongue nor heart cannot conceive nor name thee. And miraculously, Macbeth and Lennox respond at the exact same time with the exact same words. What's the matter? Confusion now hath made his masterpiece. Most sacrilegious murder hath broke ope the Lord's anointed temple and stole thence the life of the building. Here you see the word confusion at the start of this, which is our subject in the sentence. Confusion now hath made his masterpiece. So confusion is being personified as almost like an artist that is making his masterpiece. Now, confusion, if we again look at our glossary on the side here, confusion means destruction. That destruction, that makes a little more sense. That destruction, if it's personified, is made a masterpiece. Its best work, its painting is of Duncan's murder, which is what Macduff has just witnessed. Now, it's interesting, though, you'll notice that it's kind of flipped. Before, combustion meant confusion, and now confusion means destruction. Again, this is the first time I've noticed that as I'm reading. I've seen new things every time I read, and here I noticed that it fits Shakespeare's pattern of flipping things on their ends. Fair is foul, and foul is fair, and here confusion is combustion, and combustion is confusion. I don't have more thoughts on that. I just am now noticing for the first time. Tank, can you tell me why this is a sacrilegious murder? Yep, that would be the reason. Flipping to the next page, Macbeth. Notice that Macduff didn't exactly say what he had to say. He put it all into figurative language. So Macbeth says, what is it you say? The life? Mean you his majesty? Approach the chamber and destroy your sight with a new Gorgon. Do not bid me speak. See, and then speak yourselves. Ollie, what is a Gorgon? Yes, that would be it. There's a nice picture here in our glossary of Perseus holding up Medusa's head. So ultimately he's saying it would be like looking upon Medusa if you were to see what's behind this door. And then he says, go check it out. It's kind of like when you have a really, really bad smell and you just need someone else to smell it. Macbeth and Lennox, they exit, meaning they are now going into the chamber where Duncan's dead body is, and Macduff, he just starts screaming, awake, awake, ring the alarm bell, murder and treason, Banquo and Donalbain, Malcolm, awake, shake off this downy sleep, death's counterfeit, and look on death itself, up, up, and see the great doom's image. Malcolm, Banquo, as from your graves rise up and walk like sprites to countenance this horror, ring the bell. If I'm overacting, it's because every time I see a version of this play, I end up seeing a Macduff who I think is an overactor. So I think now I just assume that Macduff's a little too much. Anyway, here he is. On this one, I want to point out the line where he says, shake off this downy sleep, death's counterfeit. That's called in a positive phrase there. The death's counterfeit is describing the sleep. And so again, we have a comparison between death and sleep. At the bottom here, Malcolm and Banquo, as from your graves, rise up and walk like sprites. I didn't know this until I looked a little more closely at our glossary, but it calls to mind the last judgment, the end of times in the Christian Bible, when the dead will rise from the graves. And so again, this is kind of being compared to an end of times. It's a new hatch to the woeful times, and then it's also the end of days in a way. That's the significance of Duncan's murder. The bell rings, ding, 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 and enter Lady Macbeth. What's the business that such a hideous trumpet calls to parley the sleepers of the house? Speak, speak. She almost sounds mad, I think, that cats, really? She almost sounds mad that that someone's ringing a bell to wake everyone up in her house. She's playing this pretty well. Macduff replies, O gentle lady, 'tis not for you to hear what I can speak. The repetition in a woman's ear would murder as it fell. Holy smokes, we got a lot of irony in that line. What type of irony is this? But notice that now when Banquo shows up, he's not too concerned about saying exactly what happened. Enter Banquo. Oh, Banquo, Banquo, our royal master's murdered. Woe, alas! What, in our house? Banquo says, too cruel anywhere. Dear Duff, I prithee, contradict thyself and say it is not so. Okay, Lady Macbeth, when she says what in our house, it almost sounds like she's upset because it was in her house. Like, oh no. As a host, she sounds worried. But Banquo, I don't know if he's picking up on this or if he's just commenting to, on her strange line there, but he points out that it'd be too cruel anywhere. It doesn't matter where it happened. That's not really the important part. The king is dead. Enter Macbeth, Lennox, and Ross. And now this is the part where we finally have to see, can Macbeth pull this off? He was pretty shaky earlier. Had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. And from this instant there's nothing serious in mortality. All is but toys. Renown and grace is dead, the wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees is left this vault to brag of. Okay, what the heck did he just say? Let's start off with, I had lived a blessed time. So if I had just died an hour ago, I had lived a blessed time. Ollie, what does that mean? Yes. And we could also see it another way here. Macbeth did live a blessed time until he himself committed the murder. So it has a double meaning again. And then he says nothing serious in mortality, that all is but toys. And no, that is not what we meant by that. No, he's talking about how nothing in life is serious anymore, that nothing matters in life anymore. Then we get to this line at the bottom where he compares Duncan almost to like this cask of wine, and that the wine of life, or sorry, there's a cask of wine, and that Duncan is the wine itself, and it's gone, his blood is gone, and now the mere lees, which is just the dregs of the wine, it's the sediment at the bottom of the barrel, that's all that they have left. That's what life is like without Duncan. Enter Malcolm and Donalbain. Remember, these are the king's sons, and Donalbain wants to know, what is amiss? You are and do not know it. The spring, the head, the fountain of your blood is stopped. The very source of it is stopped. Macduff says, your royal father's murdered. Oh, by whom? This line cracks me up every time. I mean, you guys are with me, right? Like that. You don't? No? Well, it's funny because he's sitting here and, Macbeth just gave this brilliant speech about how awful life is without the king and now how shaken he is by all of that. And Malcolm, he can't muster more than like oh, by whom? And it sounds like he's like crunching an apple and well, it would be funny to a human. Actually, I don't think this line is for humor. I think Malcolm, the actor playing him, has a challenge. He's got to figure out, how do I say this without making the audience laugh? So typically, I think that he plays it stunned and he just can't really respond. And in that way, it's a little more of a sober moment. Lennox explains, those of his chamber, as it seemed, had done it. Now, those of his chamber would be the guards, of course. Those of his chamber, as it seemed, had done it. Their hands and faces were all badged with blood. So were their daggers, which, unwiped, we found upon their pillows. They stared and were distracted. No man's life was to be trusted with them. And Macbeth, oh, yet I do repent me of my fury, that I did kill them. Yeah, right? Good question. Like, when did he kill them? I thought that, they just wiped the daggers and left them there. Well, remember, Macbeth and Lennox just went back into the guard's chamber, or just went into Duncan's chamber, and the guards were right there. So on his way back out, it's assumed that right there, stab, 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 he just stabbed the guards and killed them. Wherefore did you so? Now remember that wherefore doesn't mean where, it means why. Just like when Juliet says, wherefore art thou Romeo? She's not asking, where are you, Romeo? She's asking, why are you, Romeo? So Macduff asks, wherefore did you so? And Macbeth responds, who can be wise, amazed, temperate, and furious, loyal and neutral in a moment? No man. The expedition of my violent love outrun the pauser, reason. Okay? So basically he says that nobody could be all of these things at the same time. So which of these was he? Ollie? Yeah, I would agree. And here he says that his violent love outruns the pauser reason. That reason is something that pauses and thinks and considers, but his violent love, his passion for revenge was too fast. And so he's already killed the guards. Now, of course, we know why he killed the guards, because he wants to clean up the mess. He wants not to have any loose ends out there. Here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with his golden blood, and his gashed stabs looked like a breach in nature for ruin's wasteful entrance. There the murderers, steeped in the colors of their trade, their daggers unmannerly breached with gore. Who could refrain that had a heart to love, and in that heart courage to make his love known? Okay, so I'm going to come back to our question earlier. How's Macbeth going to do? How's he going to pull this off? What do you think? Did he do it? Did he pull it off? Okay, well, everyone's staring at him. Everyone's looking at him, trying because he's the guy that just stabbed the two guys that apparently killed the king. It's a little suspicious. Perfect timing. Lady Macbeth says, "Help me hence, ho!" Look to the lady. What just happened? She fainted. Lady Macbeth just all of a sudden went down. Why? Well, in their minds, she went down because she's a woman and she just heard all this, gory talk of blood. But in reality, of course, she sees everyone staring at her husband, so she thinks, "I'm just going to throw a feint." So she's distracting them. Malcolm then turns to Donalbain during this distraction, and he says, "Why do we hold our tongues, that most may claim this argument for ours? What should be spoken here, where our fate, hid in an auger hole, may rush and seize us? Let's away, our tears are not yet brewed, nor our strong sorrow upon the foot of motion." So Malcolm and Donalbain, what they're asking about is, why are we holding our tongues? Why aren't we speaking? That most may claim this argument for ours, that ultimately this is our argument. This is our father who's been murdered. Why are we not the ones kind of leading this? And Donalbain, he says that what should be spoken here, almost like there's nothing to speak here, where our fate, hid in an auger hole, may rush and seize us. I'm going to cut out the phrase in the middle of that, where our fate may rush and seize us. He's worried that someone else, whoever the murderer is still in the building, still in the castle. He says, "Let's away, our tears are not yet brewed." They're so stunned, which goes back to Malcolm's response earlier, they're so stunned that they're not ready to go with it. They're not ready to grieve this. Banquo says, "Look to the lady!" And then Lady Macbeth is assisted off stage. "And when we have our naked frailties hid that suffer in exposure, let us meet and question this most bloody piece of work to know it further. Fears and scruples shake us. In the great hand of God I stand, and thence against the undivulged pretense I fight of treasonous malice." Basically, when he's talking about our naked frailties hid, they're kind of probably in their boxers or their jammies or whatever. They're not fully clothed, and so they want to hide those, right? Cats. Yeah. People wear clothes, so we would want to do that. So what's he describing here when he says, "In the great hand of God I stand"? Flattered, but no, not quite. It's more that he's on God's side. He's on the righteous side in this conflict. Macduff then, I mean, if someone gives a speech like that, Macduff, he says, "And so do I." And then everybody's, at that point, is pretty obligated to be like, "Oh, yeah, me too. So all." Macbeth, he says, "Let's briefly put on manly readiness and meet in the hall together." And they all say, "Well contented." Now, what he says when he says briefly put on manly readiness, he's talking about, again, clothing and perhaps the armor. He might also be referring to the tears they may be weeping, that they're going to put on their manliness that does not feel emotion, that does not show sorrow, and so forth. Everyone leaves except for Malcolm and Donalbain. Malcolm says, "What will you do? Let's not consort with them. To show an unfelt sorrow is an office which the false man does easy. I'll to England. To Ireland I. Our separated fortune shall keep us both the safer. Where we are, there's daggers in men's smiles. The near in blood, the nearer bloody." So, pausing for a second, Malcolm and Donalbain are planning one to go to England, one to go to Ireland, and they give their explanation. First, Malcolm doesn't want to consort with them. He doesn't want to talk with these people and figure this out, because to show an unfelt sorrow is an office which the false man does easy. No, actually, the murderers would be the ones who would show an unfelt sorrow. Something his father did not quite understand as well. And then Donalbain's response that yes, he's going to go to Ireland, and he thinks that separated from each other they'll be safer. Where we are, there's daggers and men's smiles. This is a great line. This is the description. You get that visual image of someone whose teeth is all daggers, and that ultimately they are here to kill them. That they whoever smiles at them might be the person who wants them dead. And then he says, "The near in blood, the nearer bloody." Here's a play on the word blood, where the near in blood might mean the nearest relation, the nearest blood relation. So whoever's a close relative might also be nearer to the bloody action, might be the murderer, because they might want the crown. Malcolm then says, "This murderous shaft that's shot hath not yet lighted." Lighted means landed. "And our safest way is to avoid the aim. Therefore to horse, and let us not be dainty of leave taking, but shift away. There's warrant in that theft which steals itself when there's no mercy left." A couple words on this one. This murderous shaft, what does that mean? No, Tank, this is not the porter speaking. That's not what he means. He means an arrow. He's talking about an arrow. So this arrow, this metaphorical arrow, has been shot, and he says it hath not yet lighted, which means landed. So, in other words, the arrow is still aflight, and they don't want it to land on them. So the best thing they can do is to avoid the aim, to shift away, to flee. And so they do. And that is scene 3.